Well, of all the crazy bonkers stories in the Bible, there are not quite as many as bizarre as the tale of Balaam and the talking donkey. Yeah, there is actually a talking donkey in the Bible. Who knew? I mean, the whole idea is so preposterous that it hardly ever comes up as a preaching topic. Maybe as a fun Sunday school story for children, but not as a serious preach. But today, as we are embarked on this A to Z of Bible characters, I thought it was a good time to pay a visit to Numbers chapter 22 and have a look at what is going on here. So, we're with the Israelites wandering through the wilderness on the way to the Promised Land. Because of various bits of unbelief and disobedience that we don't need to go into here, the journey, which should have taken about 3 weeks, is taking 40 years. We'll get a little bit more of an insight as to what has been going on next week, actually, when we come to Caleb for C in our list. But already, Israel is a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people. And the book of Numbers is called the book of Numbers for a reason. A couple of times within the book, Israel takes a census of its numbers, and chapter 2 gives us the number of 603,500 people, or more accurately, 603,500 men over the age of 20 who are able to fight. So you could probably at least double that figure. It is a lot of people. It is, well, if we're doubling it, it's 6 times the population of Herefordshire, 12 Wembley stadiums packed full of people, all on a journey headed to the Promised Land. I mean, we've seen some of the pictures of over recent months and the people coming out of Gaza along the roads, and I'm sure it's going to be a similar kind of a sight. In the previous chapter, chapter 21, the Israelites wanted to peacefully pass through the Negev desert towards the Promised Land. And the local king of the area, King Arad, didn't trust this colossal army of strange foreign folks. He got nervous and decided to launch an attack against Israel. And in response, Israel utterly destroyed him and his cities. Then Israel traveled north, sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, asking permission to pass peacefully through his country. And Sihon said no. And the Israelites then utterly destroyed him and his cities. And then much the same thing happened with King Og of Bashan. Israel was getting itself a fearsome reputation. So although the Promised Land was supposed to be at the west of the Jordan River, Israel was unexpectedly, maybe even inadvertently, conquering all the lands on the east side of the Jordan. Though there was one country, one tribe on the east side as yet unvisited by the Israelites, the land of Moab, there in purple, just on the far side of the Dead Sea. And the people of Moab, perhaps understandably, were terrified at the thought of this 1 million or so people turning up on their doorstep and their fate becoming the same as that of the Canaanites, the Amorites, and the Bashanites. So, as the reading said, they were terrified, utterly terrified. The Hebrew literally sick with fear. So scared that they all felt like throwing up. I mean, they were just, ah! What can be done? The Israelites might see themselves as poor slaves escaping tyranny, but from the Moabites' perspective, all they could see was this sea of humanity, this unstoppable machine, this tidal wave which has roared out of Egypt and seems to be swallowing up everything and everyone in its path. What is Balak, the Moabite king, to do? Because he's learned that going out and attacking the Israelites hasn't ended well for his neighbours. And so a different strategy is required. So Balak sends for Balaam. And Balaam is a celebrated kind of witch doctor from Syria, up off the top of the north of the map you've just looked at. But although he lives a long way away, for whatever reason, Balaam has gained a real international reputation to be able to manipulate the spiritual realities on the ground. The people he blesses seem to end up getting blessed, and the people he curses somehow seem to end up being cursed. So if Balaam can just issue a big and potent enough curse over the Israelites, then the problem is going to get solved without all the pain and the bloodiness and potential defeat that going to war would entail. Sounds sensible, doesn't it? Sounds like a plan. But of course, Balaam's cursing ability doesn't come cheap. The elders of Moab and neighbouring Midian clubbed together to afford his divination fees. And so off a delegation go, and Balaam goes to work. And of course, interestingly, what Balaam does is he prays to God, because he clearly does have a relationship with God, which explains how his blessing and cursing in the past has been so successful. Balaam spends the night in prayer to God, and Balaam explains to God the plight of this people of Moab in the face of the Israelite threat. And therefore, Lord, a really big curse is going to be necessary here. But God tells Balaam that it's not like that at all. God explains that the Israelites are a blessed people and therefore cannot be cursed. And the next morning, Balaam explains this to all of the officials, who in turn travel south and report back to Balak. Balak is fuming. So he sends a bigger and more illustrious delegation to Balaam, presumably with an enhanced divination fee. And Balaam spends another night in prayer, and again, God makes it very clear that he cannot curse the Israelites. And again, he explains to the delegation, even if Balak gave me his palace filled with gold and silver, there is nothing I can do to go beyond what God has told me. But this time, Balaam agrees to travel to see the king. And although God has given him permission for this journey, he is at the same time very angry with Balaam for going. Why? How does that make sense? If God's given you permission, why is he angry that he's going? Well, it's because God can see Balaam's motive. You see, Balaam has one eye on remembering to be obedient to God, but the other eye is firmly placed on the big divination fee which Barak is offering 300 miles to the south. Balaam doesn't see a problem with this. His servants don't see a problem with this. In fact, it takes a donkey to point out to this great and wise astrologer that his obedient heart is willing to listen and act upon the instructions of God, but that same heart is also in severe danger of being corrupted by the lure of big money. And Balaam, to be fair to him, admits as much. You got me, angel. I have sinned. My motive for traveling is less than pure. And Balaam even offers to turn back and not visit King Balak after all. But it's fine. With the warning of the angel and the lesson of the donkey, Balaam continues on the road. And that's as far as our reading got us. And the story, though, continues beyond our reading. I mean, I could stop here, but hopefully you're all dying to find out what happens next. Yes? Is the right answer. Okay, so Balak takes Balaam up a hillside to a place called Bamoth Baal. And there, for the first time, Balaam sees a small portion of the Israelite camp. I think that Balak hopes that when Balaam sees for himself the nature of the Israelite threat, that he will change his mind and decide that actually I do need to bring out my mega curse and neutralize this Israelite threat. Balak, at Balaam's request, sets up altars and organizes animals for sacrifice. Balaam looks out over the camp, and God fills his heart with compassion and love for the Israelites. He tells Balak about the love that God has for these people and how he cannot curse the people that God wants to bless. So, annoyed by this turn of events, Balak takes Balaam to another place, to a better vantage point where he can see the whole Israelite camp. Does this have the desired effect? Nope. At the sight of it, Balaam bursts into song. How beautiful are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling places, Israel. Like valleys they spread out, like gardens beside a river, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the waters. Water will flow from their buckets. Their seed will have abundant water. Their king will be greater than King Agag. Their kingdom will be exalted, and so on and so on and so on. And the same thing happens on a third occasion, making Balak even more frustrated. I mean, it's a funny story, right? It is hilarious. He's been paid to go and curse, and all he does is tells everybody and tells the Israelites how wonderful they are and how God is going to bless them. So then, and I quote, Balak's anger burned against Balaam. He struck his hands together and said to him, I summoned you to curse my enemies, but you have blessed them these 3 times. Now leave at once and go home. I said I would pay you handsomely, but the Lord has kept you from being rewarded. And Balaam answers Balak, did I not tell the messengers that you sent me? Even if Balak gave me all the silver and gold in his palace, I couldn't do anything of my own accord, either good or bad, to go beyond the command of the Lord. And I must say what the Lord says. Well, the story goes on. And if to rile him even further, Balaam then goes on to give further pronouncements, more oracles about how God was going to continue to bless Israel and destroy her enemies. And eventually Balak gets so fed up with Balaam that he sends him home without his divination fee at all. Now, on the basis of all of this, we might conclude that Balaam, though certainly not one of God's chosen people, was nevertheless a person who prayed and he listened to God and he acted with integrity. Yeah? But that is not the whole story. To piece together the rest of the story, we have to unearth snippets from elsewhere in the Bible. But here's what I think happened. I think that Balaam returns to have another meeting with Balak and hatches a plan. I think that he says something along the lines of, look, Balak, me old mate, about this divination fee. I know that it would be pointless cursing these Israelites because they are under God's blessing and protection. But what if I could bring your people under the same blessing and the protection that the Israelites enjoy? And Balak I think, says, okay, I'm listening. And Balaam says, well, we know we cannot defeat them in battle. We know that we cannot curse them. But what if we seduce them? We could send off our best-looking women and girls, and I could go and entice the Israelites into marrying them. They could take on your DNA, take on some of your customs, and assimilate them into an Israeli, Moabite, Midianite coalition nation. And Balak thinks to himself, what a stroke of genius. Sexual exploitation and trafficking to bring me political and economic power and security, well, that is a small price to pay. If you can sort all of this out for me, Balaam, then the divination fee is yours, my friend. And that is what he does. So how do I come to this wild conclusion? Well, let's look at the evidence. Numbers 25, verse 1. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women who invited them to sacrifice to their gods. Now, of course, God is not blind to what's going on. He has brought the Israelites out of Egypt to be a different kind of nation. He's called them to be pure. He's called them to be obedient, law-abiding, a people of love. And now that was all in jeopardy. They were being seduced. The attractions of the Moabite women were becoming more powerful than the attraction of serving their holy, rescuing God. So why are the Israelites doing this? Well, the culprit behind all of this is named in Numbers chapter 31, verse 15, when Moses exclaims, "Have you allowed all these women to live?" he asked them. "They were the ones who followed Balaam's advice and enticed the Israelites to be unfaithful to the Lord." Yes, Balaam's shenanigans might be concealed and hidden away within the pages of the Old Testament, and you might have to read between the lines to get them. But they are forcefully and roundly condemned in the New Testament. In his second letter, Peter writes to the church, warning of how convincing sounding but false teachers can infiltrate the church. 2 Peter chapter 2. "With eyes full of adultery, they never stop sinning. They seduce the unstable. They are experts in greed. What an accursed brood. They have left the straight way and wandered off to follow the way of Balaam, son of Beor, who loved the wages of wickedness." Similarly, in the letter that Jesus' brother Jude writes, again about false teachers, verse 11, "Woe to them! They have taken the way of Cain. They have rushed for profit into Balaam's error." And finally, in the Bible, in the revelation given to St. John, Jesus has these words for the church in Pergamum. "Nevertheless, I have a few things against you. There are some of you who hold to the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to entice the Israelites to sin, so that they ate food sacrificed to idols and committed sexual immorality." Well, that was a turn of a story, wasn't it? What do we learn from all of this? Well, what is the lesson that Balaam teaches us? Well, first and foremost, God is not stupid. He cannot be bribed or hoodwinked or circumvented. God gave Balaam an amazing gift. He enabled Balaam to understand how and why he wanted to bless Israel. He knew that God wanted to create a people after his own heart, a people of integrity, a people of love, a people of justice, a people who would take seriously the 10 Commandments and live by them. He wanted to create a people for whom killing and theft and lying and idolatry and adultery would have no part of their identity. In all this knowledge, Balaam's desire for personal wealth overrode all that God was trying to show him. So instead, by his words and his actions and his blatant lies, Balaam lured the Israelites into compromise, into idolatry, into adultery, and all the rest of it. So the next question, which I'm sure you've all got, is, did he get away with it? Did Balaam get his huge divination fee and live out his days in comfort and luxury on his own little Greek island? Come on, that is the question you've got on your lips, isn't it? Well, the answer is, no, he didn't. Numbers 31, verse 7. They, the Israelites, fought against Midian as the Lord commanded Moses and killed every man. Among their victims were Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian, i.e. the delegation. They also killed Balaam, son of Beor, with the sword. So it's not just Balaam, but his benefactors also killed in the battle, which only came about as a result of their attractive, rational-sounding proposals, which were, at their heart, greedy, self-centered, exploitative, and wedded to sin rather than righteousness. Wow, what a story. So how does this land for us today in Ross? How do we work out in our leaders, whether they be church leaders or business leaders or politicians, how do we discern whether they and their advisors speak words that come from God or words which come from Satan? Well, I think the answer is somehow we've got to be able to take a look at their hearts, take a look at their true motives. What is it that they are really after? Our best interests or their best interests? As Jesus himself said in Matthew chapter 7, watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. We can tell by looking at their fruit, their lifestyle, what is important to them. Are they open to taking money or promotion as they share their visions and manifestos? And in all of this, how are they treating their opponents? How are they treating the most at risk or poorest in society? How are they treating their colleagues? How are they treating their co-workers? How are they treating their donkeys? You see, the tragedy and the warning is that Balaam knew God. He had encountered him, and yet he still chose the path of materialism and self-interest. We must continually examine our heart, examine our motives, be on our guard. Knowing God is not enough to be saved. Believing in Jesus is not enough to be saved. It is only when we make him Lord and we give our hearts to him and give ourselves to his leading that we can be saved. We need this to be true of ourselves, and most especially, we need it to be true of our leaders. I had no idea that we'd have a new incoming Prime Minister when I was writing this. And I'm not pointing a finger at Andy Burnham in any sense. But the wider point is true. If we do, we can't say, I'm not interested in politics. I'm not interested in what the rest of the world is doing. Because God is. And we are the people of God. We've got to show an interest. So if you are a person who is reading the Bible looking for loopholes, how can we get our sinful desire rather the desire of God's heart? My friends, you are on a road to destruction, because God is not looking for people who are looking for loopholes. He is looking for people who will love him and serve him and be fighting for the things that God is fighting for, and be believing the things that God is believing, and be standing up for the people that God wants to stand up for. In giving our hearts fully to God, we might not find wealth or power in this world, or we might. But the more likely thing is that we'll find difficulty, we'll find persecution, because we'll be saying the things and doing the kinds of things that selfish people don't like to hear. But what we will find is life, real peace, real freedom in this world and for all eternity. I think the thing that riles me most about Balaam is that he doesn't even have a dog in the fight. He's not from Israel, and neither is he from Moab. He cares about neither. He doesn't care about their consequences. He just cares about getting his divination fee. That's what really motivates his heart. What motivates your heart? What are you thinking about? What are you thinking about every day? What's on your mind, or who is on your mind all the time?